As the auctioneer's gavel struck and cruel laughter echoed through the hall, 8-year-old Emma Lancaster locked eyes with the broken stallion everyone had deemed worthless. In that single defiant moment, she made a decision that would silence the mockers and transform both their lives forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The auction house buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with the smell of polished leather, hay, and the subtle perfume of wealth. Maxwell Harrington adjusted his silver cufflinks with practiced nonchalance as he surveyed the crowd gathering for the season's most prestigious horse auction. His reputation as one of the country's leading thoroughbred owners preceded him, commanding respect with each measured step he took across the grounds of the Willowbrook estate. Today's auction featured some of the finest racing prospects in the region, and Maxwell had his sights set on adding another champion to his already impressive collection. "Mr. Harrington, a pleasure as always." The auctioneer nodded deferentially as Maxwell passed. "I trust you'll find today's offerings to your satisfaction." Maxwell offered a tight smile in return. "We shall see, won't we?" Among the magnificent animals being paraded before potential buyers was Shadow, a striking black stallion whose coat gleamed like polished onyx under the bright lights of the auction ring. He had once been the pride of Blackwood Stables, winning 3 consecutive races before a devastating injury during the Westridge Derby. The injury had left him with a permanent limp, a defect that had transformed him from a prized racer worth hundreds of thousands to a burden his owners could no longer justify keeping. As Shadow was led into the ring, a hush fell over the crowd. Despite his injury, there was something undeniably majestic about him. A quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, the intelligent gleam in his dark eyes, the proud arch of his neck. For a brief moment, it was possible to glimpse what he had once been: a champion, a creature of raw power and grace. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, his voice echoing through the space, "lot number 27, a 5-year-old thoroughbred stallion from the esteemed Blackwood lineage. Some of you may recognize him as Shadow, former winner of the Eastlake Cup." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as recognition dawned. Many remembered Shadow's spectacular performances, the way he had thundered down the track, outpacing competitors with seemingly effortless strides. "As you can see," the auctioneer continued, his voice carefully neutral, "Shadow sustained an injury last season. The veterinary reports are available for review. Bidding will start at a modest $5,000. The price was insultingly low for a horse of Shadow's pedigree, a clear indication of how far his value had fallen. Yet even at this reduced figure, the crowd remained silent. No hands were raised, no bids offered. The auctioneer cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the prolonged silence. "Come now, ladies and gentlemen. This is a fine animal with excellent bloodlines. Perhaps we should start lower, 3,000? From the back of the room, a voice called out, "What good is a lame racehorse? He'll never run again." Another added, "He's too weak to be worth the feed he'll consume." Maxwell Harrington shook his head in disappointment. "A shame," he muttered to his associate. "He was magnificent once, but there's no room for sentimentality in this business. A horse that can't race is merely an expensive pet." In the front row, largely unnoticed amidst the crowd of wealthy adults, sat 8-year-old Emma Lancaster. Unlike the others whose eyes held calculations of profit and loss, Emma's wide blue eyes reflected only wonder as she gazed at Shadow. Her grandfather, retired veterinarian Dr. Thomas Lancaster, had brought her to the auction as part of her education. The Lancasters owned a modest farm where they rehabilitated injured animals, a passion project funded by Dr. Lancaster's lifetime of savings. "He's not weak, Grandpa," Emma whispered, her small hand clutching her grandfather's weathered one. "He's just hurt. There's a difference." Dr. Lancaster squeezed her hand gently. "You're right, sweet pea. Sometimes people can't see past an injury to the strength that remains. The auctioneer was growing desperate. 2,000? Surely someone can offer 2,000 for this fine animal. More voices joined the chorus of rejection. He's useless. Not worth the trouble. Too weak to even pull a cart. Emma felt tears welling in her eyes as she watched Shadow standing stoically amid the cruel assessments. Though the horse remained outwardly calm, she could see the subtle flick of his ears, the tension in his powerful muscles. He understood he was being judged and found wanting. $1,000, the auctioneer called out, his voice tinged with resignation. Do I hear 1,000? The silence that followed was damning. Emma looked up at her grandfather, her eyes pleading. Grandpa, please, we can't let them send him away. What will happen to him if nobody wants him? Dr. Lancaster's face was grave. Nothing good, I'm afraid. Horses like Shadow, with their racing days behind them, many end up in situations far worse than death. Emma's small fingers tightened around the lucky silver dollar her grandmother had given her before she passed away. She had been saving it for something special, something important. With sudden determination, she stood up on her chair and raised her hand high above her head. $500, she called out, her voice clear and strong despite her small stature. The crowd turned in surprise, some chuckling at the sight of the little girl in her simple gray dress, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, standing defiantly amid the sea of expensive suits and designer outfits. The auctioneer blinked in surprise before offering a kind smile. Young lady, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is a serious auction. Where is your parent or guardian? Dr. Lancaster stood up beside his granddaughter. I'm her grandfather, and I'll honor her bid. $500 for the horse. Maxwell Harrington raised an eyebrow. Lancaster, isn't it? The veterinarian? Surely you can see that animal is beyond salvaging even for someone with your skills. Dr. Lancaster met the wealthy man's gaze without flinching. My granddaughter sees something in him that you don't, Harrington. Sometimes that's all that matters. The auctioneer looked around the room, waiting for a competing bid. When none came, he struck his gavel with a sense of finality. Sold for $500 to Dr. Lancaster and his granddaughter. Emma could hardly contain her joy as she rushed forward to the edge of the ring, her eyes never leaving Shadow. The handler led the magnificent black stallion toward her, and as they approached, something remarkable happened. Shadow, who had been led around the ring with his head lowered in defeat, suddenly lifted his gaze to meet Emma's. In that moment of connection, it seemed as though the stallion stood a little taller, his eyes brightening with something that had been missing before: hope. Hello, Shadow, Emma whispered, reaching out her small hand toward his velvety muzzle. You're coming home with us. The journey home from the auction was tense. Dr. Lancaster had arranged for a horse trailer, but Shadow balked at the ramp, his dark eyes wide with fear. The handlers from the auction house grew impatient, their rough tugs on his lead rope only increasing his panic. Let me try, Emma said, stepping forward before her grandfather could stop her. The auction staff exchanged dubious glances but stepped back, giving the small girl space. Emma approached Shadow slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. It's okay, she murmured, her voice barely audible above the bustling sounds of the auction grounds. I know you're scared, but we're going to take care of you now. Shadow's ears flicked toward her, his nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. Emma stopped a few feet away, not reaching for him, simply standing there with an open palm extended. We don't have to rush, she continued, ignoring the impatient sighs from the handlers. I promise nothing bad will happen to you anymore. Dr. Lancaster watched with quiet pride as his granddaughter connected with the injured stallion. He had taught her well about animal behavior, but this natural empathy was something innate, something special that couldn't be taught. After several minutes, Shadow lowered his head and took a tentative step toward Emma. She remained perfectly still, allowing him to make the choice. When his velvet muzzle finally brushed against her palm, she smiled but didn't move. "That's it," she whispered. "We're friends now." With gentle guidance and endless patience, Emma eventually led Shadow to the trailer. He hesitated at the ramp but followed her inside, trusting this small human who had shown him kindness when others had only seen his weakness. The Lancaster farm was modest compared to the grand estates most of the auction attendees owned. Nestled in a verdant valley 20 miles from town, it consisted of 30 acres of rolling pastures, a weather-beaten but sturdy barn, and a simple 2-story farmhouse that had been in the family for generations. What it lacked in opulence, it made up for in tranquility, the perfect place for broken bodies and spirits to heal. As they pulled into the gravel driveway, Emma could barely contain her excitement. "Do you think he'll like it here, Grandpa?" she asked, her eyes never leaving the trailer where Shadow was transported. "It'll take time, sweet pea," Dr. Lancaster replied honestly. "He's been through a lot, but if anyone can help him adjust, it's you." Unloading Shadow proved easier than loading him had been. The stallion seemed to sense the difference in his surroundings, the clean country air, the absence of the tension that had permeated the auction house. He followed Emma down the ramp with only slight hesitation, his dark eyes scanning his new environment. "We prepared the end stall for him," Dr. Lancaster said, leading the way to the barn. "It's the largest one, with a view of the east pasture." Inside the barn, several curious faces peered over stall doors. A one-eyed Appaloosa, an elderly donkey with a graying muzzle, and a small chestnut pony with a twisted front leg. All were animals that had been discarded, deemed too damaged to be useful until the Lancasters had given them sanctuary. Shadow's stall was freshly bedded with clean straw, a bucket of cool water, and a net of sweet-smelling hay already waiting. But as they approached the open stall door, Shadow planted his feet, refusing to enter. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, looking up at her grandfather in confusion. Dr. Lancaster studied the stallion thoughtfully. "He spent his life in racing stables, Emma. Every time he entered a stall, it meant isolation. Racehorses don't get much turnout or socialization." Emma frowned, her young face serious as she considered the problem. "Then we won't make him go in," she decided. "Can we put him in the small paddock instead? The one next to the barn?" Her grandfather nodded, impressed by her insight. "Good thinking. He needs to learn that things are different here." The small paddock was secure yet offered Shadow freedom to move, with the reassuring barn wall on one side and a view of the larger pastures on the other. Once inside, the stallion moved cautiously, testing his injured leg on the soft ground before raising his head to take in the rolling hills beyond. Emma leaned against the fence, watching him. "Do you think he'll ever run again, Grandpa?" Dr. Lancaster joined her, his weathered hand resting on her shoulder. "Not like he used to, Emma. That injury has changed him forever. But that doesn't mean he can't have a good life. I don't care if he never runs fast again," Emma said with fierce conviction. "I just want him to be happy." As the afternoon wore on, Emma sat by the paddock, talking to Shadow in a soft, steady stream of words. She told him about the farm, about the other animals, about her plans for him. The stallion kept his distance, but his ears remained turned toward her, listening. When twilight descended, and it was time for dinner, Emma reluctantly left Shadow with fresh water and hay, promising to return in the morning. That night, as Dr. Lancaster tucked his granddaughter into bed, he found her troubled. "What if he doesn't get better, Grandpa? What if I can't help him?" The old veterinarian sat on the edge of her bed, his face gentle in the soft glow of her bedside lamp. "Healing isn't just about the body, Emma. Shadow's leg will always have its limitations, but his spirit, that's what needs the most care right now. How do I help his spirit? Emma asked. By doing exactly what you did today, by being patient, by showing him that his worth isn't measured by how fast he can run. He smiled, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her forehead. The most powerful medicine is sometimes the simplest. Being there, being kind, being consistent. Emma nodded, comforted by his words. Good night, Grandpa. I love you. I love you too, Sweet Pea. After Emma had fallen asleep, Dr. Lancaster stood at his kitchen window, nursing a cup of tea as he watched the dark shape of Shadow in the moonlit paddock. The stallion hadn't settled, pacing the fence line, his movements betraying his unease in these new surroundings. Thomas Lancaster knew the road ahead would be challenging. Shadow wasn't just physically injured. He was carrying invisible wounds from his fall from grace, from being valued and then discarded when he could no longer perform. Those psychological scars might prove harder to heal than his damaged leg. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the phone ringing. Few people called this late, and his heart sank when he recognized the voice on the other end. Lancaster, it's Maxwell Harrington. I've been thinking about that horse you and your granddaughter purchased today. What about him? Thomas asked warily. I've had second thoughts. I'd like to buy him from you. $10,000, that's 20 times what you paid, a very generous offer. Thomas frowned. Why the sudden interest, Harrington? You had your chance at the auction. There was a pause before Harrington replied. Let's just say I have my reasons. The offer stands until noon tomorrow. Think about it. That's a significant sum for a child's pet that will never be sound again. As he hung up the phone, Thomas looked back out at Shadow, now standing still, his dark silhouette elegant against the night sky. $10,000 would solve many problems for the cash-strapped farm, but he already knew what Emma's answer would be. Some things, once given, couldn't be taken back, especially a promise of sanctuary of home. Emma woke before dawn, her excitement making sleep impossible. She dressed quickly in the dim light filtering through her curtains, pulled on her boots, and tiptoed down the creaking farmhouse stairs. Her grandfather's soft snores still echoed from his bedroom as she slipped out the back door into the cool morning air. The farm was peaceful at this hour, bathed in soft gray light. Dew sparkled on the grass, and birds were just beginning their morning songs. Emma ran toward the paddock, her heart racing with anticipation. Had Shadow settled in overnight? Would he remember her? As she approached, her steps slowed. Shadow stood at the far corner of the paddock, his back to her, head hanging low. He didn't turn at the sound of her footsteps. "Good morning, Shadow," she called softly, reaching the fence. The stallion's ears flicked back, acknowledging her presence, but he remained facing away. Emma climbed onto the lowest rail of the fence, balancing carefully, as she had done countless times before. "Are you hungry?" "I brought you an apple," she said, pulling a small red apple from her pocket. She had saved it from yesterday's lunch, knowing she would want to offer Shadow a treat. Slowly, the stallion turned. His eyes were wary, but his nostrils flared with interest at the scent of the fruit. Emma remained perfectly still, holding the apple on her flattened palm. She didn't lean forward or call to him again. She simply waited, allowing Shadow to make the decision. Minutes passed. Emma's arm began to ache, but she didn't lower it. Finally, Shadow took a tentative step toward her, then another. His movements were uneven, favoring his injured leg, but there was a quiet determination in his approach. When he reached her, he stretched out his neck, lips carefully taking the apple from her palm. Emma beamed. "There you go. Good boy." Shadow crunched the apple, juice dribbling from his lips. When he finished, he surprised her by remaining close, his breath warm against her hand. Gently, Emma reached up and stroked his neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his gleaming coat. "See, we're going to be friends," she whispered. Dr. Lancaster found them like that half an hour later, Emma sitting on the fence, Shadow standing beside her, her small hand resting on his neck as she talked to him in a quiet, steady stream of words. "You're up early," he said, smiling at the sight. Emma turned, her face glowing with joy. "Grandpa, he came to me, and he let me pet him." "I can see that," Dr. Lancaster replied, approaching slowly so as not to startle the horse. "That's remarkable progress for his first morning here. You have a gift, Emma." Shadow eyed the veterinarian cautiously, but didn't move away from Emma. Dr. Lancaster stopped a respectful distance from the fence, observing the stallion with a professional eye. The morning light revealed more clearly the extent of Shadow's condition, the slight atrophy in his hindquarters, the way he distributed his weight to favor his injured leg, the old scars that marred his otherwise beautiful coat. "What happened to him, Grandpa? I mean, I know he got hurt racing, but why is he so scared?" Dr. Lancaster sighed. "Racing can be hard on horses, Emma. They're pushed to their limits from a very young age. When they can no longer perform, they're often discarded. I suspect Shadow was passed from owner to owner after his injury, each one hoping to fix him or profit from him somehow." Emma's face clouded. "That's not fair. It's not his fault he got hurt." "No, it's not," her grandfather agreed. "But in that world, horses are often seen as investments rather than living beings with feelings." After breakfast, Dr. Lancaster suggested they begin Shadow's physical assessment. "We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with if we're going to help him," he explained as they walked back to the paddock, carrying his old veterinary bag. Shadow grew tense as they approached, sensing something different in their manner. When Dr. Lancaster entered the paddock, the stallion retreated to the far corner, his body rigid with fear. "It's okay," Emma assured him, following her grandfather. "He just wants to check your leg. He won't hurt you." But Shadow wasn't convinced. When Dr. Lancaster attempted to approach, the stallion snorted in alarm, rearing slightly despite the pain it clearly caused him. "Easy, boy," Dr. Lancaster soothed, backing away. "Emma, I think he's had some bad experiences with veterinary care. Why don't you try leading him? He trusts you." Emma nodded, moving slowly toward Shadow, speaking in that same gentle, unwavering voice. "It's all right. Grandpa helps animals. He won't hurt you." It took nearly an hour of patient coaxing before Shadow allowed Emma to slip a halter over his head. Even then, he trembled when Dr. Lancaster approached, but Emma's reassuring presence kept him from bolting. With incredible patience and gentleness, Dr. Lancaster was finally able to examine Shadow's injured leg. His practiced hands moved carefully over the tendons and joints, noting every flinch and reaction. Emma stood at Shadow's head, stroking his neck and murmuring encouragement throughout the examination. "Well?" she asked anxiously when her grandfather finally straightened up. Dr. Lancaster's expression was grave. "The good news is that the injury has healed, after a fashion. The bad news is that it healed incorrectly. The tendon is permanently damaged, and there's arthritis setting into the joint." "What does that mean?" "It means he'll always have that limp, Emma, and he'll likely experience pain, especially in cold weather, or if he overexerts himself." Emma looked at Shadow, her heart aching for him. "But we can help with the pain, right, and make him comfortable?" Her grandfather nodded. "Absolutely. We'll develop a treatment plan. Gentle exercise to build strength, anti-inflammatory medications when needed, maybe even acupuncture. We can't fix his leg, but we can improve his quality of life significantly." Emma's face set with determination. "Then that's what we'll do." As they were leading Shadow back to his paddock after the examination, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. Emma recognized Maxwell Harrington immediately as he stepped out, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed wildly out of place on their modest farm. "Ah, Lancaster," Harrington called, striding toward them. "I see you've had time to examine the horse. Have you considered my offer?" Dr. Lancaster's expression hardened slightly. "I have, and so has my granddaughter. We're not interested in selling, Harrington." The wealthy man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, be reasonable. $10,000 is far more than that animal is worth in his condition." "Shadow isn't for sale," Emma said firmly, her small hand tightening on the lead rope. "Not for any price." Harrington looked down at her with poorly disguised impatience. "Young lady, I understand you've developed an attachment, but you must understand—" "No, you must understand," Emma interrupted, her blue eyes flashing. "Shadow is home now. He's staying with us." For a moment, Harrington seemed taken aback by the child's boldness. Then his expression cooled. "Dr. Lancaster, perhaps we should discuss this privately, adult to adult." "There's nothing to discuss," the veterinarian replied. "As my granddaughter said, Shadow isn't for sale. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to get him settled." As they walked away, leading Shadow toward his paddock, Emma could feel Harrington's eyes on her back. The feeling unsettled her, but she lifted her chin and continued forward. Something told her this wouldn't be the last they saw of Maxwell Harrington. "Why does he want Shadow so badly?" she asked her grandfather once they were out of earshot. "He didn't even bid on him at the auction." Dr. Lancaster's brow furrowed. "I'm not entirely sure, Sweet Pea, but I intend to find out." Dr. Lancaster had connections throughout the equestrian world from his decades as a veterinarian. After Harrington's suspicious visit, he began making phone calls, reaching out to old colleagues and friends, trying to understand the wealthy man's sudden interest in Shadow. Meanwhile, Emma devoted herself to Shadow's care. Each morning before school, she would spend time with him, talking softly and offering a carrot or apple. After school, she would rush home to continue their bonding. Under her patient attention, Shadow began to change. The wariness in his eyes gradually softened, and he started to approach the fence when he saw her coming. His ears pricked forward in recognition. "Grandpa, look!" Emma exclaimed one afternoon, 2 weeks after they had brought Shadow home. She was standing in the paddock, and Shadow was following her like a giant shadow, matching her steps, stopping when she stopped, turning when she turned. "He's playing follow the leader with me." Dr. Lancaster watched from the fence, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "You've earned his trust, Emma. That's no small thing." By the end of the first month, Shadow allowed Emma to groom him, standing quietly as she brushed his gleaming coat and carefully detangled his mane and tail. He still favored his injured leg, but the daily walks Emma took him on around the perimeter of the small paddock were strengthening his muscles and improving his mobility. The day Emma first climbed onto Shadow's back was a milestone neither she nor her grandfather would forget. Dr. Lancaster had been hesitant, concerned about putting any weight on Shadow's injured leg, but the stallion had healed enough that light riding might actually benefit him by building muscle. "No saddle," Dr. Lancaster instructed, watching nervously as Emma led Shadow to the mounting block, "and just a few minutes of walking. We need to see how he responds." Emma nodded solemnly, understanding the responsibility. Shadow stood perfectly still as she climbed onto the mounting block and then gently eased herself onto his back. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Shadow's ears flicked back and forth, processing this new sensation, but he remained calm. "Good boy," Emma whispered, leaning forward to pat his neck. "We're just going to walk a little, okay?" With the gentlest pressure from her legs, she asked Shadow to move forward. He took a cautious step, then another, carrying Emma with a steadiness that belied his injury. Around the paddock they went, at a careful walk, Shadow's stride even and measured, as though he understood the precious cargo he carried. Dr. Lancaster watched with tears in his eyes. The sight of his granddaughter sitting tall on Shadow's back, her face radiant with joy, and the once broken stallion moving with newfound purpose, touched something deep within him. As Emma and Shadow's bond grew stronger, Dr. Lancaster's investigation into Maxwell Harrington was yielding troubling results. Through a series of conversations with former colleagues and racing officials, he began piecing together a disturbing picture. "Emma," he said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table after dinner, "I need to tell you something about Shadow, something I've discovered." Emma looked up from her homework, instantly alert at the serious tone in her grandfather's voice. "What is it? Is something wrong with him?" No, nothing like that," Dr. Lancaster reassured her. "It's about Shadow's past and possibly why Mr. Harrington is so interested in him now." He spread out several papers on the table, printouts of racing records, news articles, and breeding charts. "Shadow wasn't just any racehorse, Emma. He comes from an exceptional bloodline, and before his injury, he was considered one of the most promising stallions in years." Emma looked at the papers, not fully understanding the technical details. "But he can't race anymore. Why would that matter to Mr. Harrington now?" "Because of this," Dr. Lancaster said, pointing to a particular document. Before Shadow's injury, his previous owner, Blackwood Stables, had arranged a very lucrative breeding contract. Shadow was to stand at stud after his racing career, potentially earning millions in breeding fees. "What's stand at stud?" Emma asked. Dr. Lancaster cleared his throat, momentarily flustered. "It means he would father foals, baby horses. When a stallion has won important races like Shadow did, horse owners will pay a lot of money for their mares to have his babies, hoping they'll inherit his speed and strength." Emma's eyes widened. So Shadow could be a daddy to champion racehorses. Exactly. And apparently, even after his injury, his genetics are still valuable. The contract was suspended after his accident, but not canceled entirely. But what does that have to do with Mr. Harrington? Dr. Lancaster's expression hardened slightly. "That's the interesting part. I found out that Harrington recently purchased Blackwood Stables. The breeding contract for Shadow would now benefit him, if he owned Shadow." Emma frowned, trying to process this information. So he wants Shadow just to make money from him? Not because he cares about him at all? "I'm afraid so, Sweet Pea." "But that's not fair," Emma protested. "Shadow isn't just a baby-making machine. He's a living being with feelings." Dr. Lancaster nodded gravely. "I agree, and there's more." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "From what I've learned, the facilities at Harrington's new stables aren't ideal. He cuts corners on care to maximize profits." Emma's face flushed with indignation. "We can't let him take Shadow, Grandpa. We just can't." "We won't," Dr. Lancaster promised. "But I wanted you to understand what we might be up against. Harrington is a powerful man who isn't used to being denied what he wants." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the Lancaster farm. Emma was in the paddock with Shadow when a sleek silver car pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, dressed in riding clothes that even Emma could tell were expensive. "Hello there," the woman called, approaching the paddock. "You must be Emma. I'm Victoria Harrington, Maxwell's daughter." Emma immediately tensed, moving protectively closer to Shadow. "My grandfather isn't here right now." Victoria smiled, the gesture not quite reaching her eyes. "That's all right. I actually came to see you. And Shadow, of course." She reached the fence, studying Shadow with an appraising eye that reminded Emma uncomfortably of Maxwell Harrington. "He's looking better than the last time I saw him. You've done good work with him." "You know Shadow?" Emma asked, surprised. Victoria nodded. "I was at Blackwood Stables when they first bought him as a yearling. Such promise he showed." Her voice trailed off, a hint of genuine emotion briefly crossing her face before her composed expression returned. My father can be persistent when he wants something. I thought I should warn you. We're not selling Shadow, Emma said firmly. Not to your father or anyone else. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly. I understand your attachment, but perhaps you don't fully grasp what's at stake. My father has invested millions in Blackwood's breeding program. Shadow is a key piece of that investment. Shadow isn't an investment, Emma retorted. He's our friend. Victoria studied the girl for a moment, then sighed. You know, I used to think like you when I was your age. I had a pony I adored, would have done anything for him. But in our world, horses are business, Emma. The sooner you understand that, the better. Emma stood her ground, her small hand resting on Shadow's neck. Maybe your world needs to change then. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed Victoria's face. You're an interesting child, Emma Lancaster. She reached into her pocket and extracted a business card, placing it on the fence post. When you're ready to discuss terms, call me directly. I can ensure Shadow is well treated at our facilities. As Victoria turned to leave, Shadow suddenly stepped forward, stretching his neck toward her. For a moment, the sophisticated woman's composure faltered. She reached out tentatively, allowing Shadow to sniff her hand, then gently stroked his muzzle. You were magnificent once, she murmured so quietly that Emma barely caught the words. Then, as if remembering herself, Victoria straightened and walked briskly back to her car without another glance. Emma watched her drive away, then looked at Shadow, who was gazing after the departing car, with an unreadable expression. Don't worry, she whispered, hugging his neck. I won't let them take you away. I promise. The day after Victoria's visit, Dr. Lancaster found Emma in the paddock with Shadow, working on what she called special training. She was leading the stallion in careful circles, stopping occasionally to praise him and offer a treat. What are you two up to? Dr. Lancaster asked, leaning on the fence. Emma's face lit up. I had an idea, Grandpa. What if we could show everyone that Shadow still has value, not just for breeding, but as a horse? Then maybe Mr. Harrington would leave us alone. Dr. Lancaster smiled at his granddaughter's optimism. That's a nice thought, Emma. But I'm not sure Maxwell Harrington is the kind of man who changes his mind easily. But we have to try, Emma insisted. Mrs. Wilson told me about a special horse show next month, the Meadowbrook Equestrian Exhibition. It has classes for rehabilitated horses. We could enter Shadow. Dr. Lancaster's brow furrowed with concern. Emma, that's a very prestigious event. The competition would be intense, and Shadow's injury— I know he can't jump or gallop, Emma interrupted. But there's a special category for groundwork and communication. We could do that. Shadow follows my signals perfectly now. Her grandfather studied her determined face, then looked at Shadow, who stood quietly beside Emma, more relaxed and confident than the frightened animal they had brought home from the auction. It would mean a lot of work, he warned. Daily training, plus we'd need to transport Shadow to the event, which is nearly 3 hours away. We can do it, Emma said firmly, her small hand resting on Shadow's sleek neck. Can't we, boy? As if in answer, Shadow lowered his head and gently nudged Emma's shoulder. Dr. Lancaster couldn't help but laugh. Well, it seems you've got your partner's agreement. Let me think about it. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Dr. Lancaster sat at his desk reviewing the entry requirements for the Meadowbrook exhibition. It was indeed a prestigious event, drawing competitors from across the state. The rehabilitation class Emma had mentioned was designed to showcase the abilities of horses that had overcome injury or illness. He was about to close his laptop when an email notification appeared. The sender's name made him pause. Victoria Harrington. Curious, he opened the message. Dr. Lancaster, it read, I wanted to follow up on my visit today. I understand your granddaughter's attachment to Shadow, but I urge you to reconsider my father's offer. He is prepared to increase it substantially, $20,000. This would benefit both your family and Shadow, who would receive the best care at our facilities. Please consider what's truly best for everyone involved. Victoria Harrington. Thomas Lancaster stared at the screen, troubled by the escalation. $20,000 was a life-changing sum for their modest farm, which was constantly struggling to make ends meet. He thought of the repairs the barn needed, the veterinary supplies running low, the other rescued animals who required care. But then he remembered Emma's face as she sat on Shadow's back for the first time, the pure joy, the sense of achievement. He thought of Shadow, who had finally found a place where he was valued not for what he could do or produce, but simply for who he was. With a firm click, he deleted the email. The next morning at breakfast, he announced his decision. Emma, if you're serious about the Meadowbrook exhibition, I think we should give it a try. Emma nearly knocked over her cereal bowl in excitement. Really, Grandpa? You mean it? I do, he nodded. But we'll need a proper training plan. Shadow's physical therapy needs to come first. We can't risk re-injuring his leg. I'll be super careful, Emma promised, her blue eyes shining. When can we start? Today, her grandfather smiled. After school. With the Meadowbrook exhibition just 6 weeks away, Emma and Shadow began an intensive training program. Dr. Lancaster created a schedule that balanced physical therapy with training sessions, carefully monitoring Shadow's leg for any signs of strain. Emma proved to be a natural trainer, patient and consistent. She worked with Shadow on basic commands first: walk, halt, back up, all performed with voice cues and minimal physical signals. Shadow responded eagerly, seeming to enjoy having a purpose again. You're amazing, Emma would tell him after each successful session, feeding him apple slices she kept in her pocket. You're going to show everyone how special you are. As the weeks passed, their routine grew more complex. Emma taught Shadow to move sideways on command, to turn on his haunches, to follow her without a lead rope, matching his pace to hers. They practiced in different locations around the farm to ensure Shadow wouldn't be distracted by new surroundings at the show. The transformation in Shadow was remarkable. His coat gleamed with health, his eyes were bright and alert, and though he still favored his injured leg, his movement became more fluid as his other muscles strengthened to compensate. Most striking was the change in his demeanor. The fearful, defeated horse from the auction had been replaced by a confident, engaged partner who seemed to take pride in his work. One Saturday afternoon, as Emma and Shadow were practicing their routine, a familiar black car pulled into the driveway. Maxwell Harrington stepped out, accompanied by 2 men in suits. "Well, well," Harrington called out, approaching the paddock. "I see you've been busy with my horse." Emma tensed, stepping closer to Shadow protectively. "He's not your horse." Dr. Lancaster emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a towel. "Harrington, I didn't expect to see you again so soon." Harrington smiled thinly. "I'm a persistent man, Lancaster, especially when I want something." He gestured toward Shadow. "My daughter mentioned you're training him. Quite a waste of effort, if you ask me. That animal will never be sound again." "He doesn't need to be sound to be valuable," Emma said fiercely. "We're entering the Meadowbrook exhibition next month." Surprise flickered across Harrington's face before he laughed. "Meadowbrook? My dear girl, that's a serious competition, not a petting zoo." Emma's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "Shadow and I are going to compete in the rehabilitation class, and we're going to win." Harrington studied her for a moment, his expression calculating. "Is that so? Well, here's a proposition for you. If by some miracle you and this broken-down nag actually place in the competition, I'll withdraw my offer permanently. But when you fail, and you will fail, you agree to sell him to me for $25,000. Mr. Harrington, Dr. Lancaster began, stepping forward. I don't think— Deal, Emma interrupted, her voice clear and determined. Emma, her grandfather exclaimed. I mean it, Grandpa, Emma said, not taking her eyes off Harrington. Shadow and I are going to win, and then Mr. Harrington will have to leave us alone forever. Harrington's smile widened. Brave words from a little girl. Very well, we have an agreement. He turned to one of the men accompanying him. Johnson, draw up the paperwork. I want this in writing. As Harrington and his associates walked back to their car, Dr. Lancaster pulled Emma aside. Emma, do you realize what you've done? Meadowbrook is incredibly competitive. Even experienced handlers sometimes don't place. Emma's lower lip trembled slightly, but her eyes remained determined. I know it's a big risk, Grandpa, but I believe in Shadow. He deserves a chance to show everyone what he can do. Dr. Lancaster sighed, looking over at Shadow, who stood watching them with alert, intelligent eyes. Then we'd better get to work. We've got a lot to do before Meadowbrook. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Dr. Lancaster sat on the porch, staring out at the paddock where Shadow grazed peacefully in the moonlight. He wondered if he had done the right thing, allowing Emma to make that bet with Harrington. The odds were stacked against them: a child handler, an injured horse, a prestigious competition. Yet there was something about Emma's unwavering faith in Shadow that gave him pause. Perhaps the greatest miracles happened when someone believed in the impossible. With renewed determination, he went inside to plan their strategy for the weeks ahead. If Emma believed they could win, then he would do everything in his power to help make that belief a reality. News of Emma's challenge against Maxwell Harrington spread quickly through their small community. While some admired her courage, others whispered that Dr. Lancaster should never have allowed his granddaughter to make such a reckless wager. $25,000 wasn't just money. It represented the future of their modest farm and Shadow's fate. Emma, however, remained undeterred. Every morning before school, she was in the paddock with Shadow. Every afternoon, she rushed home to continue their training. Dr. Lancaster modified their barn to create a small indoor arena where they could practice regardless of weather, using sawdust to cushion the ground and ease the strain on Shadow's injured leg. You're getting so good at this, Emma praised as Shadow executed a perfect pivot, turning gracefully on his hindquarters while keeping his injured foreleg from bearing too much weight. She rewarded him with a slice of carrot and a gentle stroke along his gleaming neck. Dr. Lancaster watched from the sidelines, clipboard in hand. He had been studying the Meadowbrook exhibition's judging criteria obsessively, crafting a routine that would showcase Shadow's strengths while minimizing stress on his injury. Emma, he called, let's try the sequence again, but this time with the music. He pressed play on an old portable stereo and soft classical music filled the barn. They had chosen a piece with a gentle rhythm that matched Shadow's natural pace, hoping to create a harmonious impression for the judges. Emma and Shadow began their routine, moving together in a dance of mutual trust and understanding that belied their short time together. As the training intensified, so did the pressure. Word had reached them that Maxwell Harrington had begun spreading rumors in equestrian circles about their participation in the exhibition. He's telling everyone it's a publicity stunt, Mrs. Wilson, Emma's teacher and a local horse enthusiast, reported during a visit to the farm. Says it's shameful to parade an injured animal for attention. Emma's face fell. That's not true. We're showing that injured horses still have value. Mrs. Wilson patted her shoulder. I know that, dear, and anyone who sees you with Shadow will know it too. Despite Emma's determination, Dr. Lancaster noticed her tossing and turning at night, heard her quiet sniffles when she thought he wasn't listening. The weight of the challenge was heavy on her young shoulders. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table reviewing their routine for the 100th time, Emma suddenly put down her pencil. "Grandpa, what if we lose?" Dr. Lancaster looked at his granddaughter, her blue eyes wide with worry, her small face pinched with anxiety. "Then we lose, sweet pea. But Shadow, listen to me, Emma," he said, taking her small hands in his weathered ones. "Win or lose, you've already accomplished something remarkable. When you found Shadow at that auction, he was broken in body and spirit. Look at him now." Through the kitchen window, they could see Shadow in his paddock, head held high as he surveyed his domain, a far cry from the dejected animal they had brought home. "You did that," Dr. Lancaster continued. "You saw his worth when no one else did. That victory can't be taken away, no matter what happens at Meadowbrook." Emma bit her lip. "But I promised he'd stay with us. I promised he'd never be abandoned again." Dr. Lancaster sighed. He couldn't lie to her. "Sometimes, Emma, life doesn't go the way we plan. But I promise you this. If the worst happens, we will make absolutely certain that Shadow is treated well. We'll insist on visitation rights. We'll check on him regularly." It wasn't the reassurance she wanted, but Emma nodded, understanding the reality of their situation. "Then we just have to win," she said simply. As the exhibition approached, unexpected allies emerged. The local farrier, who had been helping maintain Shadow's special therapeutic shoes, offered to drive them to Meadowbrook in his truck and horse trailer. Mrs. Wilson organized a bake sale at the school to help cover the entry fees and accommodations. Even the town's feed store donated a month's supply of premium grain to ensure Shadow would be in peak condition. The most surprising assistance came from Victoria Harrington. One afternoon, her silver car pulled up at the farm once more. This time she wasn't alone. A small, wiry man with graying hair stepped out alongside her. "This is Marco Vasquez," Victoria introduced him. He was Shadow's trainer at Blackwood before the accident. Emma regarded them suspiciously. "Did your father send you?" Victoria shook her head. "He doesn't know I'm here. Marco and we don't agree with how my father conducts business." Marco stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Shadow, who was watching them curiously from the paddock. "I raised that horse from a colt," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "When he was injured, Mr. Blackwood wanted to euthanize him immediately. I convinced him to try rehabilitation first, but then the stable was sold to your father." He looked at Victoria apologetically. "And my father has different priorities," Victoria finished for him. "Why are you here?" Dr. Lancaster asked, his tone cautious but not unwelcoming. Marco turned to Emma. "I've heard about what you're trying to do at Meadowbrook. I want to help." "Why?" Emma asked directly. The man smiled sadly. "Because Shadow deserves a second chance. And because what you're doing, showing the world that an injured horse still has value, that's important. More important than breeding contracts or profit margins." Victoria nodded. "My father won't change his mind easily. But if anyone can make him see beyond the bottom line, it's a child with pure intentions." Over the next 2 weeks, Marco became an invaluable coach. He knew Shadow's personality, his likes and dislikes, his little quirks that even Emma, for all her intuition, hadn't yet discovered. Under his guidance, Shadow's confidence grew and Emma's routine evolved from good to exceptional. "He responds to the slightest cue from you," Marco observed one day, watching Emma and Shadow move in perfect synchrony. "I've never seen him connect with anyone like this, not even at the height of his racing career." "That's because she doesn't see him as a means to an end," Dr. Lancaster said quietly. "To Emma, he's just Shadow. Not an investment, not a champion, just a friend who needed help." The night before they were to leave for Meadowbrook, Emma sat on a hay bale in the barn, Shadow's large head resting in her lap. She stroked his forelock gently. whispering to him about the adventure ahead. "It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks," she told him. "You're perfect to me. And tomorrow, we're going to show everyone else how special you are." Shadow's ears flicked back and forth, catching every word. His dark eyes, once dull with pain and despair, now shone with intelligence and trust. Whatever happened at Meadowbrook, the transformation in this once broken horse was undeniable. From the barn doorway, Dr. Lancaster watched his granddaughter and the stallion, marveling at the bond between them. He had initially agreed to the Meadowbrook challenge to teach Emma about courage and determination, but he realized now that she was teaching him about faith, about seeing the inherent worth in all living things, about fighting for what you believe in, even when the odds are stacked against you. As twilight deepened into night, he sent Emma to bed with promises of an early start tomorrow. Their journey to Meadowbrook would begin at dawn, and with it, the ultimate test of whether love and belief could triumph over pragmatism and profit. Dawn broke with a gentle pink glow that promised a beautiful day. Emma was already awake, too excited and nervous to sleep any longer. She dressed quickly in her show clothes, a crisp white shirt, tan breeches, and a navy blue blazer that Mrs. Wilson had altered to fit her small frame. Her blonde hair was neatly braided and tied with a ribbon that matched her jacket. Standing before the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. "You look like a true equestrian," Dr. Lancaster said from the doorway, his eyes misting slightly. "Your parents would be so proud." Emma smiled, though her stomach fluttered with butterflies. "Do you think we can really win, Grandpa?" "I think you and Shadow have already won something more important than any ribbon," he replied, helping her with her collar. "But yes, I believe you have a real chance today." By 6 o'clock, they were on the road. Sam Miller, the local farrier, drove his truck with the horse trailer in tow. Shadow had loaded easily, a testament to the trust he now placed in Emma and his human caretakers. Dr. Lancaster sat in the passenger seat while Emma insisted on riding in the trailer with Shadow, determined not to leave him alone during the long journey. The 3-hour drive to Meadowbrook seemed both endless and too short. Through the small window in the trailer, Emma watched familiar landscapes give way to rolling countryside, then to the affluent suburbs surrounding Meadowbrook Equestrian Center. With each mile, the butterflies in her stomach multiplied. Almost there, she whispered to Shadow, who stood calmly in the trailer, his dark eyes fixed on her. "Remember, no matter what happens, you're already the best horse in the world to me." When they finally arrived, Emma's breath caught in her throat. Meadowbrook was magnificent. Sprawling white fences enclosing manicured grounds, multiple arenas with pristine footing, elegant stable blocks where grooms in matching uniforms led gleaming horses worth more than her grandfather's entire farm. Massive oaks lined the driveway, their ancient branches providing dappled shade for spectators in summer finery. "It's like a different world," Emma murmured as they pulled into the designated parking area. Sam whistled low. "Sure is, but don't let it intimidate you, kiddo. A good horse is a good horse, no matter how fancy the surroundings." As they unloaded Shadow, heads turned, the stallion stepped down from the trailer with quiet dignity, his black coat gleaming in the morning sun. Despite his slight limp, there was something undeniably majestic about him, a presence that drew the eye and held it. "Is that Shadow? The Blackwood colt?" someone whispered loudly enough for Emma to hear. "Can't be. He was ruined in that fall at Westridge. Heard Harrington bought him for breeding stock." Emma lifted her chin, determined not to let the whispers affect her. She led Shadow to their assigned stall in the temporary stabling area, away from the premium permanent stalls reserved for regular competitors. Marco was waiting for them, having arrived earlier to scout the competition. "There are 16 entries in your class," he reported, helping Emma settle Shadow. "Most are from rehabilitation programs or therapy centers with professional handlers. You're the only child competitor. Emma nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. Are any of them like Shadow? Former racehorses? A few ex-racehorses, yes, but none with Shadow's record before his injury. Marco lowered his voice. Mr. Harrington is here, with a film crew. Dr. Lancaster frowned. A film crew? What for? Publicity, I imagine, or documentation of your failure, Marco said bluntly. He's expecting to win this bet. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she brushed Shadow's coat to a perfect shine, but her voice remained steady. Then we'll just have to surprise him. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Shadow was bathed, groomed, and adorned with a simple braided cord in his mane, Emma's personal touch. Dr. Lancaster reviewed the competition schedule and judging criteria with Emma one last time, while Marco offered final tips on presentation. Remember, he told Emma, the judges are looking for 3 things: the horse's progress despite injury, the communication between horse and handler, and the creativity of your routine. Shadow's story is compelling, and your bond with him is exceptional. Focus on showcasing that. As the time for their class approached, Emma led Shadow to the warm-up ring. The other competitors were already there, adults with professional attire and equipment, working with horses that, while rehabilitated from various injuries, still moved with practice precision. Emma felt small and out of place among them. Some smiled kindly at her, but others cast skeptical glances at Shadow, noting his permanent limp. One woman, leading a graceful Andalusian with a healed fracture, openly scoffed. That poor animal should be retired to pasture, not paraded around for a child's vanity project, she remarked to her companion, loudly enough for Emma to hear. Emma's cheeks burned, but she kept her focus on Shadow, who seemed to sense her distress. He lowered his head to nuzzle her shoulder gently, as if to say, I'm here. We're in this together. From the edge of the ring, Maxwell Harrington watched, surrounded by his entourage. He cut an imposing figure in his tailored suit, his cold eyes following Emma's every move. There she is, he said to the cameraman beside him. Make sure you get plenty of footage. This will make an excellent cautionary tale about the dangers of sentimentality in the horse business. Victoria stood slightly apart from her father, her expression troubled. When she caught Emma's eye, she gave a small, encouraging nod. As they waited for their turn, Emma walked Shadow in slow circles, feeling the rhythm of his movement, the steady cadence that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. This was what mattered. This connection, this trust, this journey they had taken together from that desperate day at the auction to this moment. Number 8, Emma Lancaster with Shadow, called the announcer. Please proceed to the main arena. Taking a deep breath, Emma led Shadow toward the entrance to the main arena. The space was vast, bordered by tiered seating filled with spectators. 3 judges sat at a table on one side, their expressions impassive as they reviewed their notes. Just before they entered, Dr. Lancaster appeared at Emma's side. Remember what I told you, Sweet Pea. No matter what happens in there, you've already won the most important victory. Emma nodded, swallowing hard. I know, Grandpa. I'm so proud of you, he whispered, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Now go show them what Shadow can do. As Emma and Shadow stepped into the arena, a hush fell over the crowd. The sunlight caught Shadow's coat, making him glow like polished ebony. Despite his injury, he moved with a quiet grace, his head held high, his trust in the small girl beside him absolute. Emma took her position at the center of the arena, her heart pounding. The music they had practiced with began to play, a gentle, flowing melody that matched Shadow's pace. She looked up into his dark eyes, finding in them the courage she needed. Ready? She whispered. Shadow's ear flicked toward her, his gaze steady and trusting, and then, as one, they began to dance. The arena fell silent as Emma and Shadow began their routine. The music, a flowing piano piece that seemed to ebb and rise like gentle waves, filled the space around them. Emma took a deep breath and gave Shadow the first subtle cue, a slight shift in her posture that was nearly imperceptible to anyone watching. Shadow responded immediately, stepping forward with measured grace. His injured leg caused a slight hitch in his stride, but somehow, set to music, it became part of a rhythm rather than a flaw. Emma moved beside him, her small figure dwarfed by his powerful presence, yet there was no doubt who was leading whom. They moved as one entity, connected by invisible threads of trust and understanding. From the judges' table, 3 sets of critical eyes followed their every move. The head judge, Eliza Montgomery, a renowned equestrian trainer known for her exacting standards, leaned forward slightly, her pen poised over her scoring sheet. Beside her, Dr. James Chen, a veterinary specialist in equine rehabilitation, watched Shadow's movements with professional interest. The third judge, retired Olympic dressage rider Margot Beaumont, observed with an expression that gave nothing away. In the audience, Dr. Lancaster held his breath. He knew the routine by heart, having watched Emma and Shadow practice countless times, but seeing them perform here, under the unforgiving lights of the Meadowbrook Arena, was entirely different. Every step, every transition, seemed charged with meaning. Emma guided Shadow through a series of gentle turns and halts, each movement flowing naturally into the next. She had designed the routine to minimize stress on his injured leg while showcasing his intelligence and responsiveness. At one point, she stepped away from him, leaving several feet between them, and with only the softest vocal command, asked Shadow to mirror her movements from a distance. The stallion, his ears pricked forward in concentration, matched her step for step, forward, sideways, backward, maintaining the same rhythm and pace despite the separation between them. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. Maxwell Harrington, watching from his privileged position near the judge's stand, frowned slightly. This was not the awkward display he had anticipated. The child and the broken-down racehorse were performing with a synchronicity that was undeniably impressive. His cameraman continued filming, capturing every moment of the unexpected display. As the music swelled toward its climax, Emma returned to Shadow's side and guided him into a flowing figure-8 pattern, a movement that required subtle weight shifts and careful balance from the injured horse. Shadow executed it perfectly, his dark eyes never leaving Emma, his trust in her guidance absolute. For the finale, Emma had planned something both simple and powerful. She stopped at the center of the arena and gave Shadow a signal to stand beside her. Then, with deliberate slowness, she turned her back to him and walked several steps away. The audience watched, puzzled, wondering if she had made a mistake. But then Emma raised her hand slightly, a signal they had practiced for weeks, and Shadow walked toward her, stopping precisely at her shoulder as if to say, "I'm here. I'll always follow you." Emma turned to face him and bowed deeply. Shadow, as if understanding the ritual, lowered his head in a gesture that mirrored hers. The music faded, and for a moment the arena was completely silent. Then, starting with a few scattered hands and building to a crescendo, applause filled the space. Dr. Lancaster was on his feet, clapping until his hands hurt. Marco, standing near the entrance to the arena, wiped a tear from his weathered cheek. Even Victoria Harrington was applauding, a genuine smile replacing her usual composed expression. Emma led Shadow toward the exit, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and elation. They had done it. They had performed their routine exactly as planned, without a single mistake. Shadow walked beside her, his stride steady despite his fatigue, his presence solid and reassuring. As they left the arena, Dr. Lancaster rushed to meet them. "Oh, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That was beautiful, simply beautiful." Marco nodded in agreement, taking Shadow's reins to give Emma a moment with her grandfather. The judges were impressed, I could tell, even Montgomery, and she's notoriously hard to please. Emma beamed, but her focus quickly returned to Shadow. He needs water and rest, she said, practical even in her excitement. That was a lot of work for his leg. While they settled Shadow in his temporary stall, making sure he was comfortable and rewarded with his favorite treats, the competition continued. One by one, the other rehabilitated horses and their handlers performed their routines, each with their own story of resilience and recovery. Emma watched a few of the performances, impressed by the skill and dedication evident in each one. The woman with the Andalusian, the same one who had dismissed Shadow earlier, executed a technically flawless routine that drew enthusiastic applause. A therapy center presented a formerly abused mare who now helped children with disabilities, her gentle demeanor a testament to her remarkable recovery. The competition is strong, Dr. Lancaster observed, standing beside Emma as they watched. But you and Shadow showed something special out there, something that can't be taught or practiced. Emma nodded, understanding what he meant. The bond between her and Shadow transcended mere training. It was built on mutual trust and a shared journey from rejection to redemption. As the last competitor finished, the tension in the air was palpable. The judges huddled together, comparing notes and scores, their faces serious and focused. The announcer invited all participants to gather in the arena for the presentation of awards. Emma led Shadow back into the arena, taking her place in the line of competitors. Some of the adults gave her encouraging smiles, their earlier skepticism replaced by respect. Shadow stood quietly beside her, seemingly unaffected by the crowd and commotion, his attention focused solely on the small girl at his side. Maxwell Harrington moved closer to the front, his cameraman still filming. Victoria joined him, her expression unreadable as she watched the judges approach the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "The judges have reached their decision for the rehabilitation class at this year's Meadowbrook Equestrian Exhibition." Emma's hand tightened on Shadow's lead rope. This was it, the moment that would determine not just their standing in the competition, but Shadow's future. She looked up at the magnificent black horse beside her, remembering how far they had come from that desperate day at the auction. No matter what happened next, she was proud of him, proud of what they had accomplished together. "Before we announce the placings," the announcer continued, "the judges would like to make a special acknowledgement." The head judge, Eliza Montgomery, stepped forward. Her usual stern expression softened somewhat. "In my 30 years of judging equestrian events," she began, "I have rarely seen such a profound example of communication and trust between horse and handler as we witnessed today." Emma held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the judge's next words. "While all of our participants demonstrated remarkable progress and skill," Montgomery continued, "there was one pair whose performance transcended technique. They showed us that rehabilitation is not just about physical recovery, but about restoring faith, confidence, and purpose." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the line of competitors before settling on Emma and Shadow. "Emma Lancaster and Shadow," she said, "please step forward." Emma's legs felt wooden as she led Shadow forward. The enormous arena seemed to shrink until it contained only them, the judges, and the weighted silence of anticipation. Shadow moved beside her with perfect synchronicity, his injured leg causing only the slightest unevenness in his gait. Judge Montgomery's stern face softened as they approached. "Young lady," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed space, "how old are you?" "8, ma'am," Emma replied, her voice small but clear. "8," Montgomery repeated, glancing at her fellow judges before continuing. "And how long have you been working with Shadow?" 2 months, ma'am." A murmur rippled through the audience. 2 months was an incredibly short time to develop the level of communication they had demonstrated. 2 months, Montgomery echoed, her eyebrows rising slightly. Most of our competitors today have been in rehabilitation programs for a year or more. Would you tell us a bit about Shadow's story? Emma swallowed hard, looking up at the towering black stallion beside her. She hadn't prepared for this. She glanced toward her grandfather, who nodded encouragingly from the sidelines. "I found Shadow at an auction," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Nobody wanted him because of his injured leg. They said he was too weak to be worth anything. But I didn't see weakness when I looked at him. I saw a friend who needed help." She stroked Shadow's gleaming neck, drawing strength from his solid presence. "My grandfather says sometimes people can't see past an injury to the strength that remains. Shadow may never race again, but that doesn't mean he isn't valuable. He's smart and brave and kind. He just needed someone to believe in him." Dr. Chen, the veterinary judge, leaned forward. "The injury to his foreleg appears to be a severe tendon tear with subsequent arthritis. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Emma nodded. "Grandpa says it healed wrong before we got him. He'll always have a limp, but we do special exercises every day to build his other muscles and make him more comfortable." "Remarkable," Chen murmured, making a note on his clipboard. Margot Beaumont, the former Olympian, spoke next. "Your routine was beautifully designed to accommodate his limitations while showcasing his intelligence. Who choreographed it?" Emma blushed slightly. "I did, ma'am, with help from my grandfather and Mr. Vasquez, Shadow's former trainer. We worked on what Shadow could do comfortably, not what he couldn't do anymore." From his position near the front, Maxwell Harrington watched with growing discomfort. This was not proceeding as he had expected. The judges, notably the most respected experts in the equestrian world, were clearly impressed by the child and the horse he had dismissed as worthless. "Emma Lancaster," Montgomery announced, turning to address the audience as well as the competitors. "The judges unanimously agree that you and Shadow have demonstrated the true spirit of this class. Rehabilitation is not merely about physical recovery, but about finding new purpose and building new relationships based on trust and understanding." She paused, looking down at her notes. In technical scoring, several competitors achieved higher marks for complexity and precision. But in the category of communication between horse and handler, which accounts for 40% of the overall score, you and Shadow received the highest marks in the history of this competition. Emma's heart leaped into her throat. Shadow, sensing her excitement, nickered softly and lowered his head to nuzzle her shoulder. "It is therefore our pleasure to award you and Shadow second place in this year's rehabilitation class." The arena erupted in applause. Dr. Lancaster let out a whoop of joy, and Marco pumped his fist in the air. Even Victoria Harrington was clapping enthusiastically, a genuine smile lighting up her usually composed face. Second place. They had done it. They had placed in the competition, which meant Shadow would remain with them. Emma felt tears of relief and happiness streaming down her cheeks as she hugged Shadow's neck. The woman with the Andalusian was announced as the first-place winner, and she accepted her ribbon with grace, pausing to congratulate Emma as they passed each other. "I misjudged you and your horse," she admitted quietly. "You showed us all something important today." As Emma accepted the red second-place ribbon, she looked out at the audience, her eyes finding Maxwell Harrington. The businessman's face was a carefully controlled mask, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. He knew what this meant for their agreement. After the ceremony concluded and the competitors began filing out of the arena, Harrington approached, his cameraman still in tow. Dr. Lancaster quickly moved to Emma's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Well played, Lancaster," Harrington said, his voice clipped. "It seems I underestimated both you and the horse." "We had a deal, Mr. Harrington," Dr. Lancaster reminded him firmly. Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Indeed we did, and I'm a man of my word." He gestured to his assistant, who produced a document from his briefcase. "This formally withdraws any claim or interest I might have in Shadow. He's yours, free and clear." As the businessman turned to leave, Emma called after him. "Mr. Harrington?" He paused, looking back at her with a raised eyebrow. "Thank you for the bet," she said sincerely. "Without it, we might never have discovered what Shadow could really do." Something flickered in Harrington's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or a reluctant admiration for the child's lack of gloating. He gave a curt nod and continued walking. Victoria lingered behind, approaching Emma and Shadow with genuine warmth. "Congratulations," she said. "You were magnificent, both of you." She glanced toward her departing father, then lowered her voice. "He won't admit it, but you taught him something today. You taught all of us something." As the Harringtons left, Marco joined them, his weathered face wreathed in smiles. "Did you see their faces when Shadow mirrored your movements from across the arena? Priceless." He patted Shadow's neck proudly. "I always knew he was special, but what you two have together." He shook his head, at a loss for words. They led Shadow back to his temporary stall, where Emma carefully removed his show bridle and began to groom him, the familiar motions a comfort after the emotional intensity of the competition. The red ribbon hung on the stall door, a tangible symbol of their achievement. "How do you feel, Sweet Pea?" Dr. Lancaster asked, watching his granddaughter methodically brush Shadow's gleaming coat. Emma considered the question, her small face serious. "Happy," she said finally. "But also, I don't know, like this was always supposed to happen, like Shadow and I were meant to find each other." Her grandfather nodded thoughtfully. "Some might call that destiny." "All I know," Emma said, reaching up to stroke Shadow's velvety muzzle, "is that when everyone else saw weakness, I saw something different, and now everyone else can see it too." Shadow lowered his head, his dark, intelligent eyes fixed on the small girl who had changed his fate. In that moment of quiet connection with the red ribbon fluttering gently in the breeze from an open window, the journey they had begun at the auction seemed to come full circle. But it wasn't an ending. For Emma and Shadow, it was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one they would write together, step by careful step, bound by a trust that had proven stronger than prejudice, more valuable than profit, and more healing than any medicine. The journey home from Meadowbrook was vastly different from their tense drive there. Emma sat in the trailer with Shadow again, but this time she wore her red ribbon pinned to her jacket, and the stallion carried himself with a newfound confidence. Dr. Lancaster and Sam chatted animatedly in the front of the truck, reliving every moment of the extraordinary performance. News of their achievement had already spread to their small community. As they pulled into the farm's driveway, Emma was astonished to see a crowd gathered, neighbors, schoolmates, and local horse enthusiasts, all holding handmade signs congratulating them. Someone had even strung a banner across the barn entrance. "Welcome home, champions." "But we got second place, not first," Emma whispered to her grandfather as they unloaded Shadow, who regarded the crowd with curious dignity. "Sometimes being a champion isn't about winning, Sweet Pea," Dr. Lancaster replied. "It's about changing hearts and minds, and you two certainly did that." The days that followed were filled with unexpected developments. A local newspaper ran a front-page story about Emma and Shadow, complete with a photograph of them accepting their ribbon. The headline read, "Local girl proves injured horse's worth at prestigious competition." More surprising was the phone call that came a week after their return. "Emma," Dr. Lancaster called, holding the receiver away from his ear. "It's Mrs. Wilson. She says the Westridge Therapy Center wants to talk to us about Shadow." Emma's heart clenched with fear. They can't have him, Grandpa. Mr. Harrington signed the paper. Her grandfather chuckled. No, sweet pea. They don't want to take Shadow. They want both of you to visit their center. Apparently, several parents of children with disabilities saw your performance at Meadowbrook and thought their kids might benefit from meeting Shadow. And so, on a bright Saturday morning in early autumn, Emma and Shadow visited Westridge Therapy Center. The facility specialized in equine-assisted therapy for children with various physical and emotional challenges. Emma led Shadow carefully through the entrance, where they were greeted by the center's director, Dr. Rachel Morgan. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Morgan said warmly. "We have several children who've been eagerly awaiting your visit." In a sunlit indoor arena, 5 children with various disabilities waited with their parents and therapists. Some were in wheelchairs, others used walkers or crutches. One young boy seemed physically able but remained close to his mother, his eyes downcast. "Everyone," Dr. Morgan announced, "I'd like you to meet Emma Lancaster and Shadow." As Emma led Shadow into the arena, the children's reactions varied from excitement to apprehension. Shadow, who once might have been nervous among strangers, now walked calmly beside Emma, seeming to understand the importance of his behavior. "Shadow had an accident when he was a racehorse," Emma explained to the children, her voice clear and confident. "He hurt his leg very badly, and people thought he couldn't do anything important anymore. But they were wrong." She demonstrated how Shadow could respond to voice commands and subtle signals, showing the children that communication didn't always require words or physical strength. One by one, under careful supervision, each child was given the opportunity to interact with Shadow. A girl in a wheelchair reached up to stroke his muzzle, her face lighting up when he gently lowered his head to meet her hand. A boy with leg braces giggled in delight when Shadow performed a bow at Emma's command. But it was the quiet boy, the one who had remained apart, who had the most remarkable reaction. "This is Jason," Dr. Morgan introduced him. "He hasn't spoken since his accident 6 months ago." Emma approached Jason slowly, Shadow matching her careful pace. "Would you like to meet Shadow?" she asked. "He's very gentle." Jason looked up, his eyes meeting Shadow's. Something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of shared experience. Slowly the boy extended his hand. Shadow lowered his head, his breath warm against Jason's palm. "He was hurt too," Jason whispered, his voice rough from disuse. Emma nodded, her heart soaring at the sound of his voice. "Yes, but he's still strong and brave." "Like me?" Jason asked, so quietly that only Emma could hear. "Just like you," she confirmed. By the end of their visit, Dr. Morgan was visibly moved. "What you and Shadow have done today," she began, then shook her head, overcome. "Would you consider making regular visits? I believe Shadow could help our children immensely." And so a new chapter began for Emma and Shadow. Twice a month they visited Westridge, where Shadow's gentle presence and Emma's compassionate guidance helped children face their own challenges. Jason began speaking again, eventually becoming Shadow's most devoted admirer. Word of their work spread. Other therapy centers reached out, and soon Emma and Shadow were visiting hospitals and schools throughout the region. Dr. Lancaster adapted his schedule to accommodate these trips, recognizing the profound impact his granddaughter and her once-rejected horse were having on so many lives. One crisp morning in late October, 6 months after the Meadowbrook exhibition, Emma was surprised to see a familiar silver car pull into their driveway. Victoria Harrington stepped out, as elegant as ever, but somehow softer around the edges. "I hope you don't mind my unannounced visit," she said, as Emma greeted her by the paddock where Shadow grazed. "I wanted to see how you both were doing." "We're doing great," Emma said, beaming with pride as she told Victoria about their therapy visits. Victoria listened thoughtfully, her gaze drifting to Shadow. "My father would never admit it," But your performance at Meadowbrook affected him deeply. He's made some changes at Blackwood." "What kind of changes?" Emma asked. "For one, he's implemented a comprehensive rehabilitation program for injured horses instead of immediately selling them off." She smiled wryly. "He claims it's just good business, protecting his investments, but I think it's more than that." Before leaving, Victoria handed Emma an envelope. "The Blackwood Foundation would like to make a donation to support your therapy work. My father insisted it be anonymous, but, well, I thought you should know it came from him." As Victoria's car disappeared down the driveway, Emma opened the envelope and gasped at the check inside. Enough money to build a proper indoor arena where they could host therapy sessions year-round. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Emma sat on the paddock fence, Shadow grazing peacefully beside her. Her grandfather joined her, his arm around her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts, sweet pea." Emma leaned against him, watching Shadow's outline against the sunset. "I was just thinking about that day at the auction, how everyone said Shadow was too weak to be worth anything, and now look at him. He's helping kids find their strength." Dr. Lancaster nodded thoughtfully. "You know, there's an old saying, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. You saw value in Shadow when others couldn't because that's the kind of person you are." Emma considered this, watching as Shadow lifted his head to the evening breeze, his silhouette powerful and dignified despite his permanent limp. "I think," she said slowly, "that sometimes people confuse being broken with being weak, but they're not the same thing at all." Her grandfather squeezed her shoulder, his eyes misting slightly. "No, they certainly aren't. And sometimes what looks like weakness to one person is actually the greatest strength of all." As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Emma and her grandfather walked back to the house, leaving Shadow to his evening grazing. The stallion watched them go, his dark eyes reflecting the first stars of night. In the distance, the newly hung sign at the entrance to their farm caught the last rays of twilight. "Lancaster Healing Hearts, where broken doesn't mean weak." And Shadow, once rejected and deemed worthless, stood tall in his paddock, living proof that with patience, faith, and love, even the deepest wounds could become the foundation of a new and meaningful purpose.